cybersecurity in general, kind of like a game of whack-a-mole, right? You don't gain value from solving a problem that no one, or a security issue that no one is attacking.
Yeah.
We as developers consume tons of software from many different vendors and many different channels. And we wondered how easy it would be to actually compromise organizations by leveraging these channels. Besides just talking about it, we actually did something. So we decided to go on a little experiment. Hackers and threat actors, they're people and they're lazy. And they leverage kind of least friction path.
Let's say it's a browser extension, comes into the enterprise. It isn't malicious. It's allowed by the enterprise. But what about the updates, right? Because I think that auto updates happen and maybe that browser extension was approved, but the auto update isn't being looked at, right?
99% of the time, this world of kind of auto updates and updates are completely missed. This updates is a great example of just, one technique that attackers use to compromise organizations very, very easily.
Hi, Amit. Thanks so much for joining my podcast, Vigilance. Good to have you here today. I was thinking about, sure. I was thinking about how we met, our mutual a friend, Mike Fay. And for our audience, I'll mention Mike Fay is the co-founder and CEO of Island, very, very successful company. And he introduced me to you. And I remember what he said to me. He said, "This one's obvious." I'm like, "It is?" And he goes, "Super obvious, easy to understand. COI is needed by every single enterprise, full stop." And I'm like, okay, I trust Mike implicitly, but that does seem like a big statement. And now that we've been working together for a few months, he is spot on. And so that's why I wanted to have you on the podcast, because this is very rare that we have a solution that uniquely meets a need that everybody needs and nobody has a solution to. So I want to get to that, but I want to educate about the problem space and why this is something everybody needs. So I'll pass it to you for an introduction and maybe tell us a little bit about COI and maybe how you started the company.
I appreciate you having me, Pam. I think, it's definitely very fun to work on something that, as you mentioned, is obvious. It's like, cybersecurity is a world where, some products, you need to go very deep into the tech to explain kind of what you do and what problem you solve. And I greatly enjoy working on a problem that, we'll get into in a second, but it's a problem that you can just get from the problem itself. So really, thanks for having me. I'll give a short intro about myself. So, Amit, I come from a technical background, started my kind of world in computer science as a gamer. Once I got my first computer, from there, I started actually getting into developing video games. That, anyone has been through this journey, it takes you straight into programming languages. That's like the first or second thing you do when you try to develop video games. And that, started my whole kind of computer science career. Got drafted to the military service in Israel, did cybersecurity for many, many years. The stuff that we do can't be kind of overstated. It's, I think even the movies underappreciate and undersell kind of the stuff we do at that place in the military service. So it was great many years that I did there. Post my military service, started a company. I was a CTO of a consumer app that we use by hundreds of thousands of people. And that was my first actual experience being a buyer in cybersecurity. So, we were collecting, information from people that was, SSN numbers and payment information. And, you have anything from regulation to actual real world problems around cybersecurity there. And, I experienced what it is to buy cybersecurity products and experience using them firsthand. And I think, those 6 years got me to a point where I understood kind of what a big world and problem space there is in cybersecurity. And that was 2 years ago. Essentially 2 years ago, I started my current journey around COI. We actually did a reverse playbook of starting a cybersecurity company. Many cybersecurity companies, the ones that you spoke about it, and others that are very popular in the industry, came kind of about and started as a means of trying to kind of find a problem to solve, and really hunting these big trends in the industry of what has become a new problem and how can we solve it. Because I think cybersecurity in general, it's kind of like a game of whack-a-mole, right? You don't gain value from solving a problem that no one, or a security issue that no one is attacking. So that's how the industry traditionally happens. Koi kind of started from a backroom kind of chat about me and my co-founders, where we're all technical in our backgrounds, and we all have this technical orientation. We're all developers at heart, and we had this kind of thesis of today that the way that software is consumed has been significantly different than in the past. We saw that we as developers consume tons of software from many different vendors and many different channels, and we wondered how easy it would be to actually compromise organizations by leveraging these channels. Besides just talking about it, we actually did something. So we decided to go on a little experiment where we developed an IDE extension, actually. So developers famously use IDEs to develop their code and work on their product. One of those most popular IDEs is called Visual Studio Code. It's a Microsoft product, and it came onto the market with kind of a new thesis, a new kind of way of working. Previously, all IDEs were prepackaged software. It's just huge software, weighs a ton, but it solves all your problems. So, it has, remote debuggers, and it has, it supports every language you want to use, every programming language you want to use. And then came along Microsoft. They said, no longer it's this big, heavy program that you install that solves every single use case you have in the world. Let's make it modular. And that's why they built Visual Studio Code, where essentially it's just a text editor in its core, but it has this ability to install extensions. And each one of these extensions is essentially something that can extend the functionality of this core IDE. As developers, we see that we consumed a ton of these extensions, and we chose that path of testing our experiment and our thesis. So we went ahead and developed an IDE extension. What we said, kind of what we'll do is essentially develop this piece of software, upload it to where users consume extensions from, in this case, the Visual Studio Code marketplace, and kind of see what happens. And that's what we ended up doing. We developed the Darkula extension. I think some of you may hear this name, and it kind of might ring a bell because it went kind of viral after we did this. But essentially, what happened is that we took the most popular theme extension on the Visual Studio Code marketplace called Dracula. We just switched the R and the A and uploaded to the store with a small addition of, letting us know who installed it, kind of what is their host name, where are they in the world, and some other bits of information that we can understand kind of the impact of what we did. I think it took 45 minutes, something like that, for us to do this end to end. And it was live on the store. Within 7 days, when we came back to check like what's going on with this thing, small experience we did, after hours, we were shocked because this small IDE extension that we created in 45 minutes and just uploaded to the store was actually inside of the world's largest organizations and most complex organizations. We held tens of multi-billion-dollar companies that had installed this item.
Amit, did they think that it was Dracula, or did they, because you just changed 2 letters, did they think they were getting something else? Oh my goodness. Okay.
That was the intended kind of mechanism. That these channels, these marketplaces, they have this like inherent problem where there is no verification. There's no, some of them do claim to have certain verifications, but they actually don't have very complex protections.
So this is what the adversary is doing, right? The adversary is just got a full network of ways. This is their distribution channel. That is so interesting that it took. I didn't really know that you did that experiment, so I'm learning here too.
That's how we started the Koi. Kind of that was the initial kickoff, and once we saw kind of the impact of this, we had to responsibly disclose this to the organizations. So like, as 3 guys from a coffee shop, we talked with like the the world's largest and most complex organizations and their CISOs, and they're the ones who told us, solve this problem for us. Thanks for letting us know that you've infiltrated the environment, but we need a solution. And that's the whole story of how Koi came about to be Koi, because once we did that and talked with those stakeholders, they took us to all of the different marketplaces, app stores, registries that are around. And turns out that it's not only us doing this. Like you said, Pam, adversaries are already there, and they were there long before us. We just kind of stumbled upon this world and managed to find a big problem that organizations are tackling.
Right. So interesting, right? Because it's marketplaces, it's registries, it's app stores. It's the front door to all the software coming into the enterprise today. It's our supply chain. And so it's a huge problem. Nobody's looking at this. Nobody's looking at what it's open source, right? So nobody's looking at what malicious code is coming into. It's not if, it is coming into the how. Is there a way to share with our audience how big the problem is?
I think, this problem is something that's, has come around to be one of the biggest problems in the last few years. I think, the first place people actually met this problem was in their apps, in their production spaces, right? So there's this whole talk around AppSec and supply chain security. It all stems from the problem that we're solving. I think the only difference that has kind of the only thing that's changed since the SolarWinds breach and kind of where we are today is that more and more threat actors leverage that same attack vector, and they no longer see it as a way to the production. They see it as a way to the endpoints. They see it as a way to get this first entry point into the organization. I think the most famous breach or even famous hacker group that were recorded in this world is the Lazarus Group, right? They're the APT group allegedly run by North Korea. I think they've been around since probably better part of like 2010. They're the ones behind the Sony breach in 2014 and a streak of financial attacks and cybercrime. They've been in the past probably 3 years continuously found to be leveraging these registries, specifically like PyPi and npm, as a means of distribution. So there's been in the most of 2024 and 2025, I think only last month we found a few that were connected to Lazarus Group. There's this ongoing campaign where they leverage these registries as the initial access vector to the organizations. From there, they do plethora of things, from installing backdoors to doing info stealing. But they're recorded, as one of the largest APTs to leverage this attack vector. I think there is a lot of different reasons to why this is, but hackers and threat actors, they're people and they're lazy, and they leverage
they're lazy.
They leverage the kind of least the least friction path that they can to get into organizations, and this is definitely one of those.
Yeah, and so you're this gateway, not to say the answer, but I'll just, for our audience's efficiency, you're that gateway to ensure that malicious code doesn't get into the enterprise. So what about a malicious code that a clean, let's say it's a browser extension, comes into the enterprise. It isn't malicious. It's allowed by the enterprise because maybe they've scanned it, maybe. But what about the updates? Like the auto updates, right? Because I think about auto updates happen, and that maybe that browser extension was approved, but the auto update isn't being looked at, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think the world splits into two: organizations that already know this problem, organizations that don't know this problem. The ones that know this problem and are tackling this problem, they're looking at the initial installation. But 99% of the time, this world of kind of auto updates and updates are completely missed. I think the most famous incident is the Cyberhaven incident, occurred last year in 2024 and on Christmas Eve. There was this admin that was phished to give access in Cyberhaven to their extension, right? Cyberhaven is this DLP company that developed a Chrome extension, a browser extension, to do DLP on the browser. They were compromised, and threat actor just uploaded a new version of the same extension that does DLP with added malicious code that steals cookies and passwords and other nasty stuff. And uniquely, this was an extension takeover. This whole notion of kind of updates is something that is completely missed in this world. There's built-in security issues to all these platforms. Like Chrome has this auto-update mechanism. As soon as that new version was uploaded to Cyberhaven, it was instantly installed in 400,000 endpoints. It was completely trusted program. All right, Cyberhaven was authorized by the security team. It's a security product. But this single update for this extension managed to compromise organizations deeply inside. So I think it's a world that there's multifaceted, and I think this updates is a great example of just one technique that attackers use to compromise organizations very, very easily.
Well, why doesn't the EDR catch it?
That's a great question. I think to understand it, you need to look kind of a little bit on the history of attacks on the endpoint. Historically, attacks on the endpoint were very low-level attacks. There were like operating system level attacks, things like injecting DLLs and hooking to Windows APIs and other things like that. Came along EDRs, to try and solve that. And in order to do that, they need to sit as low as they can and try to monitor that activity. When you look at kind of the attacks that happen on the endpoint today, they're completely different, right? Attacks on the endpoint are much more software level today. So they're stealing source code, stealing SSH keys, stealing passwords, different things like that. And it's a problem that the EDRs have a very hard time getting. The reason is that, EDRs, they look at everything on the endpoint as an executable. If that executable is trusted, they're good. They don't know, right? Whatever that executable does and it's trusted, they approve. The problem is that all of these kind of worlds of marketplaces, app stores, registries, they're trusted and legitimate software, right? Like NPM, PyPi, the Chrome browser, the Mac App Store, they're all legitimate software. As an EDR, whatever happens inside of those pieces of software considers legitimate, whether it reads files, whether it does network communication, it doesn't matter. It's a trusted software. But what actually happens inside is this extensibility space, right? Those code packages that run inside a node, those browser extensions that run inside of the browser, those IDE extensions that run inside of the IDE, or even AI models that run inside of Hugging Face and other PyPi tools. So I think that the reason to that miss is exactly that. They're trusted software that leverage trusted operations. It's no longer these very low-level type of attacks. That is the main reason that we see kind of EDRs missing this world. And I think it's not only a world of malware, right? There's a lot of different problems in this space, like compliance, adware, licensing, spyware, and other things.
Right. And also, I remember you telling me that when you go do a proof of concept, 3 out of 4 of them have malicious code already in the environment. So if the EDR was getting the job done in any way, shape, or form, it wouldn't be 75% of the time you're still finding it. So that's super interesting. So is there certain marketplaces that are more malicious or more targeted? You mentioned PyPi earlier. Is it a problem across the board, or has the adversary found where they're most profitable?
I think, there's definitely different levels of kind of where we see the most activity in marketplaces. The inherent issue is that every piece of software tries to become a platform today and adds that layer of extensibility. The only difference is that sometimes this extensibility has certain level of kind of freedom that it can have on the software, and others may be more restricted. Where we see kind of most activities, anything from browser extensions where they have tons of freedom. Google has been battling this world all the time, trying to reduce kind of what browser extensions can do, and they're still abused all the time. ID extensions is probably one of the biggest ones as well. ID extensions today have zero limitations. They can do anything. Read files, write files, execute commands on the machine. So if you have a compromised ID extension on your endpoint, you're as good as compromised completely. And I think lastly, we see NPM and PyPi, kind of the package managers, also being wildly manipulated because kind of the strategies that adversaries use there are very easy to manipulate. But we've seen anything from Office add-ins to Hugging Face models being malicious. So I think it's a world that we'll see grow and grow kind of as time goes on.
Right, because they're figuring this out as they're going. Yeah, and I think what you just said is super important about this. Isn't just for this, although it is important to developers because they do download a lot of stuff, open source. This is really every user, right? It's Office, it's browser extensions, it's every desktop in the enterprise is exposed. Have you seen any companies try to solve it themselves? Because this
Yeah.
is pretty, I mean, the ones that recognize the problem and they didn't, and before Koi, have a solution, they're going to try to build something, right? And I would imagine they run into a scale issue, but I'd just be curious what that looks like, a DIY.
Yeah, 100%. I think, we've seen organizations do crazy things to solve this problem, but it usually splits into three main buckets. So, there is this world of organizations that, don't do anything. They kind of stay vulnerable to info stealers, ransomware, everything kind of that we see distributed through these channels today. There's this world of organizations that leverage kind of, there are different security tools like proxies to block marketplaces. So essentially, not giving access, for example, to anyone in the organization to go to huggingface.com, right? Issue with that kind of mechanism is that they hurt productivity, right? They create friction. They've encouraged the employees to sidestep these protections. So that's kind of one way that we see organizations deal with it. I think lastly, there is a minority of organizations that actually manually vet every single item that comes through these channels. And that is, mind-boggling to us because it's not only tons of work for the security team, it's also not really good as a security practice because, often updates are missed, like we spoke about, transfer of ownership attacks are missed. There are so many ways to still kind of compromise the organization this way. But it's amazing that you still see organizations putting in that operational value and work to solve this problem. So I think that is one of those three things are definitely ones that led us to understand this is a big problem that we need to solve.
Yeah, exactly. So we've talked a lot about the problem. I think people understand it now for sure. Sometimes I talk to folks who aren't aware of the problem or haven't thought about it, but most do know. So how are you doing this at scale? There must be part of your IP must be automation, right? Because there's so many marketplaces and the updates are happening and there's uploads of open source happening. I mean, I heard Hugging Face has 200,000 new models a month or some crazy number like that. So how do you scale to that? Because you're continuously monitoring and scanning. That's hard, right? So you've tackled the scale issue, and how have you done that?
Yeah, I think I like just to add to even underscore that even further. We're in a world and a time in the world where productivity is like a business metric that everybody's looking at. In the world of like AI, you have CEOs like the Toby Lutke from Shopify, telling their employees use AI, enhance your productivity using AI before doing anything. Make sure AI can't do that. And kind of everybody's looking at this productivity metric. And I think, with that, you can no longer kind of, sit and do this manual work and create friction and hurt productivity. And in order to solve that, like you said, we have to leverage automation. Kind of the way we look at it at Koi is we've essentially kind of when we started back in the Dracula days, we've built the risk engine. Essentially, the way we look at this problem is we try to look at every single item and automate that risk process. So we've actually taken an AI-based approach. So essentially what we're doing is, imagine if you have this security engineer at a Fortune 100 organization manually vetting these items. We do that, but with AI. So we have this kind of AI researcher, you can say, agentic researcher, that looks at everything. So essentially looking at, who's uploaded this item to this marketplace, who's behind this item, what's his reputation, how long has it been around, what are the components that came about this item. We look at what actually comes along with this item into the organization. Are there vulnerabilities inside of it? Are there any compromised secrets? We look and actually read the code to understand if there's different types of malicious code snippets that we could raise. And I think lastly, we even look at the behavior. So we look at every single item, we try to run it, see kind of where it communicates to, what it does on the machine. And we come up with this risk-oriented approach where each one of these indicators essentially gives us an indication of how risky this item is. And we do this continuously. Any new version, any change in listing, any transfer of ownership, the entire risk process runs from start to finish. By doing that, you can leverage these policies in order to automate this process completely. I'll give you an example. You can say, anything that just went through a transfer of ownership, don't allow that in my organization. Don't allow that new version because it might be risky. Maybe someone added some malicious piece of code. So once you look at it from this risk-oriented approach, you can automate all of that manual labor that you do manually with policies.
Yeah, and so you're leveraging AI, and that's a big. How many marketplaces? I don't want to just say marketplaces. I want to say registries and app stores too. But how many marketplaces do you support today?
We support tens, but there are hundreds. This is a never-ending world. I think probably every organization we meet comes up with a new request to add to this list. Everybody's talking about MCPs, right? This world of kind of extensions for AI. Just because MCPs came about the scene 3 months ago, there have been a numerous amount of new marketplaces came about to distribute MCPs. So this is a world that continuously grows. There are hundreds and hundreds of marketplaces, and I foresee it to just keep growing.
Right. See, and so you say you're supporting tens, like 20 or 30, 20 to 30.
Yeah, I think about 20, 30. The big ones, anything from NPM, PyPi, Homebrew, to all the browsers, all the IDEs like Chrome, Firefox, Edge, Visual Studio Code, JetBrains. We do Hugging Face, we do GitHub, we do the Microsoft Store, we do the Mac App Store. So we look at those very famous ones, those obvious ones where are super being abused by the adversaries today. Those are the ones that we initially set out to support.
So the customer can essentially, your customers can essentially say, okay, I can just open the door for everybody to go to these marketplaces that you support and know that no malicious code is coming in. Does it require an agent?
No. So actually, we went about kind of a unique way. So, we don't believe organizations need another agent. I think nearly every endpoint security product has an agent to come along with today. And we just leverage one of those to provide our capabilities. So we would integrate.
So you're leveraging an agent that already exists, like an
exactly.
EDR. Okay.
Exactly. We would leverage your EDR. We would leverage your MDM to provide that discovery and remediation of all these items in this world. That's how we go about the endpoint piece.
And then the enforcement's at the proxy level, right?
Yeah, exactly. So in order to make sure that, once we come into the organization, the way we go about is, first of all, showing you what exists inside your organization, right? So you can build and kind of plan what items you want to allow and what not, right? This is a world of balancing productivity and security. If there is some certain item that's being used across your entire organization, it's probably not a good idea to block that item. So first, we show you what exists. And the second step is to curate, is doing that kind of prevention piece, where uniquely not a lot of security companies go about doing prevention these days, but we do. And we do that through the proxy level, right? We would integrate to your SWG, SASE, pack file, DNS. We have multiple ways of doing this, but we leverage those mechanisms in order to give you the ability to curate these marketplaces, app stores, and registries to your liking, removing kind of results or changing install buttons to request approval buttons. That's the type of stuff that we do to make sure that it's the least intrusive as possible.
Right, right. Makes sense. Super interesting. I mean, and I know already know the answer to this because I get asked this question all the time. What's the user experience like? Because they don't want to interrupt productivity, and they want they want to have a good user experience. So it sounds like the user goes and does what they normally do. They go to the marketplace or wherever the app store and download what they need. And if there's something malicious, a message just comes up and they're not allowed to download it. So their experience doesn't change and they don't want to download something malicious. So they're supportive, right? Because you've explained it to them. So that's super positive. Uh, anyway, so I know we're running out of time. I'm watching the clock and just making sure we stay on time. So any final thoughts? I mean, this is so exciting because we've not these conversations haven't existed, but back to Mike Fay for a second, he was right. Everybody has this problem to solve, and nobody has solved it. So that's my final comment anyway. So I'll pass it to you for a final comment.
I think, I think that this problem splits kind of the world into two, those that experience the breach in this world and those that will experience a breach. I don't think it's a matter of if, it's a matter of when. The amount of marketplaces are growing all the time, right? We give the example of MCPs. The amount of items that are on these marketplaces, app stores, and registries is growing all the time. It's hundreds of percent a year. And also with that, the amount of threat actors abusing these worlds is just growing every single day. I think, we see organizations battling with this problem of productivity and security, and how do you balance that? And I think, last thing I would say is that, we, obviously encourage everyone to adopt this kind of risk-based approach, implementing visibility, governance, curation mechanisms, and ensuring kind of that you can, as an organization, allow productivity while kind of staying safe.
Yeah, I love that. That's a good summary, by the way. It is. It's security is always a balance of being an enabler, but also managing the risk. So good. Thank you very much, Amit, for joining my podcast. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.